Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Horizon's Edge, watching the alien planet grow larger in the viewport. The world below was unlike anything he had ever seen. Purple oceans stretched across the surface, and massive crystal structures jutted from the continents like frozen lightning. This was Valoria Prime, home to one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. He adjusted his dress uniform and checked his sidearm one more time. As head of security for this mission, Jake knew everything had to be perfect. Ambassador Christine Hall was counting on him to keep her safe during the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. The Valorians were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors with technology that made Earth's best weapons look like children's toys. Jake had been a Marine for 12 years. He had fought in the border wars against pirate raiders and survived 3 combat deployments. His face carried a thin scar along his jaw, a reminder of a knife fight on a frozen moon. He was 32 years old, tall and lean with short brown hair and steady gray eyes. People said he had a calm presence that made others feel safe. Jake never thought much about it. He just did his job. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, report to the briefing room, a voice said over the ship's communication system. Jake made his way through the corridor. The Horizon's Edge was a diplomatic vessel, not a warship, but it still had a crew of 200. Most of them were nervous about this mission. The Valorians had a reputation for being cold and harsh. They judged other species based on strength and honor. Humans were newcomers to galactic politics, and many alien races saw them as weak. In the briefing room, Ambassador Hall waited with her staff. She was a woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes. She had negotiated treaties with a dozen alien species and never backed down from a challenge. "Jake, I need you to understand something," she said as he entered. "The Valorians respect strength above all else. They won't trust us unless we show them we can handle ourselves. Your security team needs to look professional and ready for anything." "They are, ma'am," Jake replied. "We've drilled for every scenario. My people know what to do." "Good, because if this mission fails, Earth loses its chance at an alliance. The Valorians have weapons technology we desperately need. There are hostile species at our borders and we're outgunned. We need their help." Jake nodded. He understood the stakes. Earth had joined the galactic community only 20 years ago. Humanity had faster-than-light travel, but their weapons and shields were generations behind most other civilizations. An alliance with the Valorian Empire could change everything. 2 hours later, the Horizon's Edge entered orbit around Valoria Prime. A squadron of Valorian warships approached, their hulls covered in crystalline armor that gleamed in the light of the system's blue sun. They were elegant and deadly, like sharks made of diamond. "This is Valorian Imperial Command," a voice said over the communication channel. The translation software made it sound cold and formal. "You are cleared to land at the Royal Palace. Deviation from the approved flight path will result in immediate destruction." The pilot swallowed hard and guided the ship down. They descended through purple clouds and over vast cities that sparkled with crystal technology. The palace sat on a mountain overlooking the capital. It was a massive structure of white stone and glowing blue crystals, beautiful and intimidating at the same time. The ship landed on a platform near the palace entrance. Jake assembled his security team in the airlock. There were 8 of them, all experienced soldiers dressed in formal uniforms with weapons at their sides. Lieutenant Amy Carter was his second in command, a sharp-eyed woman who never missed a detail. Corporal Danny Phillips was their heavy weapons specialist, and the rest were good Marines who followed orders. "Remember, we're guests here," Jake told them. "Professional and alert, but not aggressive. Show respect, but don't show fear. These people value strength." The airlock opened, and the heat of Valoria Prime washed over them. The air smelled of ozone and something sweet Jake couldn't identify. A delegation of Valorian guards waited at the base of the ramp. They were tall, most of them over 7 feet, with skin that had a faint bluish tint. Their eyes were solid gold without visible pupils. They wore armor made of overlapping crystal plates that hummed with energy. The lead guard spoke in their language, a series of musical but sharp sounds. The translation device in Jake's ear converted it to English. "Ambassador Hall, you and your party will follow us to the throne room. You will show proper respect to Queen Ishara and the royal family. Any sign of disrespect or threat will be met with death." Ambassador Hall didn't flinch. "We understand and will behave with appropriate honor." They walked through the palace, and Jake tried not to stare at everything around him. The walls were made of living crystal that glowed from within. Holographic art floated in the air, showing battles and heroes from Valorian history. Everywhere they looked, there were warriors in crystal armor, watching them with those strange golden eyes. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling stretched up at least 100 feet, and the walls were covered in crystalline patterns that shifted and moved. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat the throne. It looked like it had been carved from a single massive sapphire. Queen Ishara sat upon the throne, and Jake felt his breath catch. She was imposing, nearly 8 feet tall, with sharp features and long silver hair that seemed to move on its own. Her armor was made of black crystal that absorbed light, and her eyes glowed brighter than any other Valorian's. Next to her stood a younger woman, clearly her daughter. The princess was shorter, perhaps 7 feet tall, with the same golden eyes but a softer expression. She wore armor of white and blue crystal. "Ambassador Hall of Earth," Queen Ishara's voice echoed through the chamber. "You come before the Valorian Empire seeking alliance. Tell me why we should consider your weak species worthy of our attention." Jake saw Ambassador Hall's jaw tighten, but her voice remained steady. "We may be new to the galactic stage, Your Majesty, but humanity has proven itself capable. We have courage, adaptability, and a will to survive that has carried us through countless challenges. We offer friendship, trade, and loyalty to those who would stand with us." The Queen's expression didn't change. "Words are cheap. The galaxy is full of species that make promises they cannot keep. What can humanity offer that we cannot take by force if we desired it?" The princess leaned close to her mother and whispered something. The Queen glanced at Jake and his security team, studying them with an intensity that made him feel like prey being sized up by a predator. "Very well," the Queen said finally. "You will stay as our guest for 1 lunar cycle. We will observe your people and decide if you are worthy. Tomorrow night there will be a formal banquet. We will discuss terms then." Ambassador Hall bowed. "We are honored by your hospitality, Your Majesty." As they were led away to their quarters, Jake noticed the princess watching him. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he saw something unexpected in her expression. Curiosity. Then she turned away, and the moment was gone. Jake had a feeling this mission was going to be more complicated than anyone had expected. The guest quarters assigned to the human delegation were surprisingly comfortable. The rooms were large, with walls of smooth white stone and furniture that seemed to grow organically from the floor. Everything had a soft blue glow from the crystal lighting embedded in the ceiling. Jake made sure his security team was properly positioned before he allowed himself to rest. That night, he stood on the balcony of his room, looking out over the Valorian capital. The city stretched for miles in every direction, a sea of glowing crystal towers and flowing energy streams. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings like schools of luminescent fish. 3 moons hung in the purple sky, each one a different size. Jake thought about home. Earth seemed very far away now. He wondered if he would ever see the green hills of Virginia again, or smell the ocean air. This mission could last months, and there was always the chance it might fail. If the Valorians decided humanity wasn't worth their time, Earth would be left vulnerable. The next day passed slowly. Ambassador Hall and her staff worked on preparing for the banquet. Jake spent the time reviewing security protocols with his team and studying maps of the palace. Lieutenant Carter had managed to get some information from one of the Valorian guards, a younger warrior who seemed less hostile than the others. "They're testing us," Carter told Jake. "Everything we do is being watched and judged. The Queen wants to see how we handle ourselves in their world. Then we'll show them what humans are made of," Jake said. When evening came, servants arrived to escort them to the banquet hall. Jake and his team wore their dress uniforms, dark blue with silver trim. They looked sharp and professional, though Jake knew they were still plainly dressed compared to the Valorians. The banquet hall was breathtaking. A long table made of clear crystal ran down the center of the room, and it seemed to float a few inches above the floor. The chairs were made of the same material, shaped to fit the larger Valorian bodies. Hundreds of candles floated in the air, their flames burning different colors. Queen Ishara sat at the head of the table, with Princess Lyris on her right. The rest of the table was filled with Valorian nobles and military commanders. They were all tall and imposing, wearing elaborate armor and carrying themselves with the confidence of natural warriors. The humans were seated near the middle of the table. Jake sat across from Princess Lyris, which made him somewhat nervous. Up close, she was even more striking. Her armor was intricately designed with patterns that seemed to tell a story. Her golden eyes watched everything with keen intelligence. The meal began with a series of dishes that Jake couldn't identify. Some were delicious, others were strange, and a few made his throat burn. He noticed that the Valorians were watching how the humans reacted to the food. This was part of the test, he realized. They wanted to see if humans could adapt. Ambassador Hall handled herself perfectly, engaging Queen Ishara in careful conversation about trade and mutual defense. The queen listened but gave away nothing. She was like a statue carved from ice, beautiful but cold. Halfway through the meal, Princess Lyris spoke directly to Jake. Her voice was melodic but strong. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, I understand you are a warrior among your people." Jake set down his fork and met her eyes. "I've served in the human military for 12 years, Your Highness. I've seen combat. Tell me about human warriors. What drives you to fight?" The table grew quieter. Other Valorians were listening now. Jake chose his words carefully. "Humans fight for many reasons. Some fight for their country, some fight for honor or duty. But most of us fight for the people we love. We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Princess Lyris tilted her head. "Not for glory? Not to prove your strength?" "Glory and strength matter," Jake said. "But they're not the most important things. A warrior who fights only for himself is hollow. Real strength comes from fighting for something bigger than yourself." The princess looked intrigued. "In Valorian culture, warriors seek honor through victory. We prove ourselves in combat to rise in status. The strong lead and the weak follow. This is the natural order." "With respect, Your Highness, I think that's only part of the truth. Strength matters, but so does wisdom. So does compassion. Some of the strongest people I've known were those who used their power to help others, not to dominate them." A few of the Valorian nobles made sounds of disapproval. One of them, a scarred warrior with black crystal armor, spoke up. "The human speaks foolishness. Compassion is weakness. The galaxy respects only power." "Then explain why your empire seeks alliances," Jake replied calmly. "If power is all that matters, why negotiate with anyone? Why not simply conquer?" The warrior's eyes flashed with anger, but Queen Ishara raised a hand. "An interesting point, Lieutenant Commander. Perhaps humans are not as simple as we believed." Princess Lyris smiled slightly. It was the first time Jake had seen a Valorian smile, and it changed her whole face. "Tell me about Earth. What is your world like?" Jake relaxed a bit. "It's beautiful. We have green forests and blue oceans. The sky is lighter than yours, and we have only one moon. Earth is old and scarred from wars, but it's home. Every sunset is different, and the seasons change the whole planet 4 times a year. You speak of it with love," the princess observed. "Of course. It's where I was born, where my family lives, where everything I care about exists. And you would die to protect it?" Without hesitation. The princess studied him for a long moment. "I am beginning to understand your people better, Jake Morrison." The use of his first name surprised him, but he didn't show it. Around them, the banquet continued. Servants brought more food and drink. The Valorian nobles talked among themselves, discussing politics and military matters. Ambassador Hall was deep in conversation with one of the Queen's advisors. Then everything changed. Alarms began blaring throughout the palace. The crystal walls flashed red. Valorian guards rushed into the banquet hall, their weapons charged and ready. Queen Ishara stood immediately, her hand going to the sword at her side. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. One of the guards knelt before her. "Your Majesty, we are under attack. The Crimson Syndicate has breached the palace defenses. They are inside the building." The Queen's expression turned deadly. "How many?" "At least 30, possibly more. They have military-grade weapons and armor." This was planned. Jake was already on his feet, his hand on his sidearm. His security team moved quickly, forming a protective circle around Ambassador Hall. The other humans looked terrified, but they stayed calm. "All nobles will evacuate to the secure chambers," Queen Ishara commanded. "Guards with me. We will eliminate these traitors." Explosions echoed from somewhere in the palace. The sound of weapons fire grew closer. Then the doors to the banquet hall exploded inward, and armed figures poured through the smoke. They wore black armor without markings, and their faces were covered by helmets. They carried plasma rifles that glowed with deadly energy. There were at least 15 of them, and they moved with military precision. "Death to the corrupt empire," one of them shouted. "Death to the false queen!" The Valorian guards engaged immediately. Energy blasts filled the air and the beautiful banquet hall became a war zone. Jake drew his weapon and pushed Ambassador Hall behind an overturned table. His team returned fire, their bullets less advanced than Valorian weapons but still effective at close range. Through the chaos, Jake saw one of the attackers break away from the main group. The figure was moving toward Princess Lyris with deadly intent. In his hand was a plasma blade, a weapon that could cut through almost anything. The princess was fighting off two other attackers, her own blade moving with incredible speed. She didn't see the third assassin approaching from behind. Jake didn't think. He just moved. He ran across the banquet hall, dodging energy blasts and leaping over bodies. The assassin raised his plasma blade high, ready to strike down the princess. Jake threw himself forward, his body slamming into hers and pushing her aside. The plasma blade came down and caught Jake across the chest and shoulder. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was like being touched by the sun itself. The blade burned through his uniform, through skin and muscle, reaching down to the bone. Jake screamed but didn't fall. Instead, he raised his pistol and fired 3 times at point-blank range. The assassin dropped, dead before he hit the ground. Jake staggered, blood pouring from his wound. The world was starting to blur. He could hear Princess Lyris shouting something, but the words didn't make sense anymore. More guards were arriving. The remaining attackers were being killed or captured. Jake's legs gave out and he fell. Strong hands caught him before he hit the floor. He looked up and saw Princess Lyris holding him, her golden eyes wide with shock and something else. Something he couldn't quite identify. "You saved me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You took the blade meant for me." "Job description," Jake managed to say, though it came out as a weak joke. Then the darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. Darkness surrounded Jake, warm and thick like water. He floated in it, feeling nothing. No pain, no cold, no fear. Just peace. Somewhere far away, voices called to him, but they seemed unimportant. It would be so easy to just stay here in the dark, to let go and drift away forever. But something pulled him back. A memory, a feeling of duty. He had people depending on him. Ambassador Hall needed protection. His team needed their commander. And somewhere, a princess with golden eyes needed someone who would stand between her and death. Jake fought against the darkness. It was hard, like swimming through mud, but he pushed forward. The voices grew louder. Light appeared, painful and bright. His eyes opened. The first thing he saw was white crystal ceiling above him. Everything smelled clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. His chest and shoulder felt strange, numb but also heavy. When he tried to move, gentle hands pressed him back down. "Do not move, Lieutenant Commander Morrison. Your injuries are still healing." The voice was musical and feminine. Jake turned his head carefully and saw a Valorian woman in white robes standing beside his bed. She had silver hair and kind eyes, though they still glowed with that unsettling golden light. "Where am I?" Jake's voice came out rough and dry. "The Royal Medical Wing. You have been unconscious for 3 days. Your injuries were very serious. The plasma blade burned through muscle and cracked your shoulder bone. Without our medical technology, you would have died. 3 days. Jake tried to process that. The attack. What happened? Is everyone safe? The Crimson Syndicate was defeated. 15 attackers were killed and 7 were captured alive. They are being questioned now. Your security team performed well. No one from the human delegation died, though 2 of your soldiers were wounded. They have been treated and are recovering. Relief washed through Jake. Ambassador Hall? She is safe. She has been here many times to check on you. Jake noticed movement near the door. Princess Lyris entered the room and the doctor immediately bowed. The princess wore simpler clothes now, a long robe of blue fabric that seemed to shimmer. Her hair was unbound and fell past her shoulders like liquid silver. "You are awake," she said, approaching the bed. "I am glad. I feared you might not survive." "Hard to kill," Jake said, managing a weak smile. The princess dismissed the doctor with a gesture. When they were alone, she sat in a chair beside the bed. Her expression was complex, mixing relief with something that looked like confusion. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. "You barely know me. I am not your queen or your leader. Yet you threw yourself in front of a plasma blade to save my life. No rational being would do such a thing." Jake thought about his answer. "Where I come from, protecting others isn't about whether it's rational. It's about what's right. You were in danger and I could help. That's all that mattered. But you could have died. You nearly did die." Better me than you. Princess Lyra stared at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. In Valorian culture, warriors fight for honor and glory. We take risks to prove our strength and earn status. But what you did was not about any of those things. You gained nothing from your action except pain and injury. I gained the knowledge that you're alive. That's enough. The princess stood and walked to the window. For a long time, she said nothing, just looked out at the city below. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. My mother taught me that strength is everything. The strong survive and the weak perish. This is the natural order of the universe. But you have shown me something different. You were weaker than the assassin. His weapon was superior. His armor was better. By every measure, he should have killed you easily. Yet you won because you were willing to sacrifice yourself. That kind of strength, I do not understand it, but I cannot deny it exists. Jake tried to sit up, and this time he managed it, though his shoulder protested. Your Majesty, strength comes in many forms. Physical power is just one kind. There's also the strength to protect others, to stand up for what's right even when it's hard, to care about someone else more than yourself. Those things matter too. You keep calling me Your Majesty. My name is Lyris. I would prefer you use it. That wouldn't be proper. After what you did for me, proper no longer applies. You have earned the right to speak my name. Before Jake could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Queen Ishara herself who entered, followed by several guards and advisors. Everyone in the room immediately showed respect. Jake tried to stand, but the Queen gestured for him to remain seated. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, the Queen said, her voice as cold and formal as ever. You have created a complicated situation. I apologize if I caused any problems, Your Majesty. Do not apologize for saving my daughter's life. I am not displeased with your actions, merely surprised by them. Tell me, do all humans behave this way, throwing themselves into danger for strangers? Some do, the ones worth knowing. The Queen studied him with those glowing eyes. In Valorian culture, there is an ancient tradition. When a warrior saves a member of the royal family through personal sacrifice, a sacred bond is formed. We call it kaisha. It means blood debt. The royal who was saved becomes honor-bound to that warrior. They must repay the debt. That's not necessary, Jake said quickly. I was just doing my job. Nevertheless, the tradition exists. Princess Lyris now owes you kaisha. She cannot refuse this bond. It is written in our oldest laws. Lyris stepped forward. I accept the bond willingly, Mother. This human has proven himself worthy of honor. Queen Ishara nodded slowly. There is more. Lieutenant Commander, your actions during the attack did not go unnoticed. My guards reported that you and your small team fought with great skill. You protected not only your ambassador, but also several of my nobles. You killed 3 attackers yourself, even while wounded. This kind of courage and combat ability is rare. My team did most of the work, Your Majesty. Do not be modest. I have seen the recordings. You moved like a trained warrior, and you thought clearly, even in chaos. These are valuable qualities. The Queen paused, and for the first time her expression softened slightly. I am invoking another ancient law, one that has not been used in over 1,000 years. I am naming you Shikarian, a title that means protector of the throne. You will remain on Valoria Prime and serve as personal guardian to Princess Lyris. Jake felt like he had been hit in the chest again. Your Majesty, I am honored, but I have duties to Earth. I cannot simply abandon my post. This is not a request, Lieutenant Commander. It is a royal decree. However, I am not unreasonable. I have already discussed this with Ambassador Hall. She believes your assignment here could strengthen the alliance between our peoples. A human in a position of honor within the Valorian Empire sends a powerful message. What about my team? My responsibilities? Your second-in-command, Lieutenant Carter, will assume command of your security detail. You will retain your rank in the human military, but your primary duty will be to my daughter. This arrangement benefits both our peoples. Jake looked at Lyris. She was watching him with those golden eyes, and he could see hope in her expression. She wanted this. The realization surprised him. How long would this assignment last? He asked. That depends on many factors, the Queen said. For now, consider it indefinite. You will be given quarters in the royal wing. You will train with our elite warriors and learn our ways. In exchange, you will teach us about human combat techniques and strategy. And most importantly, you will ensure my daughter's safety. Jake knew he didn't really have a choice. This was bigger than him. If his presence here could help secure an alliance that might save Earth, He had to accept. But part of him wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. "I accept, Your Majesty." The Queen nodded with satisfaction. "Good. You will begin training as soon as you are healed. The doctors say you will be ready in another week. Until then, rest and recover. You will need your strength for what comes next." She turned and left, her guards following. The advisors filed out after her until only Lyris remained. "You did not have to accept," she said softly. "Yes, I did. For Earth. Is that the only reason?" Jake met her eyes and saw the question behind the question. He chose his words carefully. "It's the most important reason. But I would be lying if I said I didn't find Valoria fascinating, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't curious to learn more about your people." Lyris smiled, and again it transformed her face. "Then we have much to teach each other, Jake Morrison. I think the coming months will be very interesting." She left, and Jake was alone with his thoughts. He looked down at his bandaged chest and shoulder. The pain was starting to return as the medicine wore off. He had made a choice that would change his life forever. He had no idea if it was the right one. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Lyris holding him as blood poured from his wound. He remembered the shock and gratitude in her eyes. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. He would protect her again if he had to. He would take another blade, another bullet, another wound, because that was who he was. That was what it meant to be human. The week of recovery passed slowly. Jake spent most of his time in the medical wing, letting the Valorian healing technology repair his damaged body. The treatment was incredible. Instead of months of painful healing, the crystalline devices rebuilt his tissue in days. He could actually watch the wound knit itself back together through a special viewing screen. The doctors told him the scar would remain, though. Some marks went deeper than medicine could reach. Ambassador Hall visited him several times. She explained that his new assignment was causing quite a stir back on Earth. Some military officials were angry that he had been taken from his post. Others saw it as an opportunity. A human serving in the Valorian royal court could provide valuable intelligence and strengthen diplomatic ties. "You've become a political symbol, Jake," Hall told him during one visit. "Whether you wanted it or not. How do you feel about that?" "I feel like I just wanted to save someone's life and now everything is complicated," he replied honestly. She smiled. "Welcome to diplomacy. Nothing is ever simple. But for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. The Queen respects you. That's more than most humans have achieved with the Valorians." Lieutenant Carter also came to see him. She brought him reports on the security situation and updates on the team. The 2 wounded soldiers were recovering well. The investigation into the Crimson Syndicate was revealing that the attack had been planned for months. "The Valorians are taking this seriously," Carter said. "They've arrested over 50 people connected to the Syndicate. Turns out it's a bigger organization than anyone knew. They want to overthrow the Empire and replace it with some kind of military council." "Are they going to attack again?" Jake asked. "Unknown. But security has been increased everywhere. You picked a hell of a time to become a royal bodyguard, sir." Jake laughed, though it hurt his shoulder. "I didn't exactly plan it." On the 7th day, the doctors declared him healed enough to begin light training. Jake was given new quarters in the royal wing of the palace, 3 rooms that were far nicer than anything he had ever lived in before. The bedroom alone was larger than his entire apartment back on Earth. Everything was made of that beautiful white stone and glowing crystal. There was even a private balcony that overlooked the royal gardens. A Valorian servant named Kellis was assigned to help him adjust. Kellis was younger than most Valorians Jake had met, perhaps the equivalent of 20 human years. He was eager to practice his English and asked endless questions about Earth. "Is it true that humans only live for 100 years?" Kellis asked, while helping Jake unpack his belongings. "Most of us live 70 to 90 years. Some make it to 100, but it's rare." Kellis looked shocked. "So short. Valorians live for 300 years, sometimes more. How do you accomplish anything in such a brief time?" "We work fast," Jake said with a smile. "And we try to make every year count." That afternoon, Lyris came to take him to the training grounds. She wore practical armor now, fitted for combat rather than ceremony. Her hair was pulled back in a complex braid, and she carried a plasma blade at her side. "Are you ready to see how real warriors train?" she asked. "Lead the way." The training grounds were located in a massive courtyard beneath an open sky. Dozens of Valorian warriors were practicing there, working in pairs or groups. The sound of clashing blades and energy weapons filled the air. Jake saw techniques and fighting styles he had never encountered before. The Valorians moved with a grace that seemed impossible for beings their size. Our combat training begins in childhood, Lyris explained as they walked. By the time a Valorian reaches adulthood, they have spent years mastering weapons and hand-to-hand combat. Honor demands that every member of our society be able to defend themselves. Everyone trains, even nobles. Especially nobles. Those who lead must prove they have the strength to do so. I have trained since I was 6 years old. My mother believes that a weak ruler brings shame to the empire. They approached a raised platform where an older Valorian warrior was instructing a group of students. He was massive even by Valorian standards, with scars covering his arms and face. When he saw Lyris, he stopped and bowed. "Princess, you honor us with your presence." "Master Corbin, I bring you a new student. This is Jake Morrison, the human who saved my life. He is now Shikarian and requires training in our combat methods." Corbin looked Jake up and down with obvious skepticism. "A human. I have heard they are fragile creatures. Are you certain he can withstand Valorian training?" "I saved your princess from a plasma blade," Jake said calmly. "I think I can handle a workout." Corbin's scarred face split into a fierce grin. "Spirit. Good. You will need it. Training begins tomorrow at dawn. Come prepared to learn, or prepared to fail." Over the next several weeks, Jake trained harder than he ever had in his life. Corvin was a brutal instructor who accepted no excuses. The other students were all young Valorian warriors, and they resented having a human among them. Jake was smaller, weaker, and slower than any of them. In the beginning, he lost every sparring match. But Jake had something they didn't expect. He had experience. He had fought in real combat, against real enemies who wanted him dead. He knew how to adapt, how to use his smaller size as an advantage, how to think 3 moves ahead. Slowly, he began to improve. Lyris often watched his training sessions. Sometimes she would join in, sparring with him personally. She was incredibly skilled, her movements fluid and precise. Jake rarely won against her, but he learned something every time they fought. "You fight like you have something to prove," she told him after one session. "Why is that?" Jake wiped sweat from his face. "Because I do. Every human here is being judged by how I perform. If I fail, it reflects badly on my entire species. That is a heavy burden to carry. It's my burden. I accepted it when I took this position." As the weeks passed, something unexpected happened. Jake and Lyris began spending time together outside of training. She would invite him to walk in the gardens or to share meals or to attend cultural events. She seemed genuinely interested in learning about humanity and Earth. Jake told her about oceans and forests, about seasons and storms. He described cities made of concrete and steel instead of crystal. He explained human art, music, and literature. Lyris absorbed it all with fascination. In return, she taught him about Valorian history and philosophy. She explained their religion, which was based on the belief that strength and honor reflected the natural order of the universe. She showed him Valorian poetry, which was surprisingly beautiful. She played music on an instrument that looked like a harp made of light. "Your people value things we consider weaknesses," Lyris said one evening as they sat in the garden under the 3 moons. "Compassion, emotion, attachment. We are taught to suppress these things. Why? Because they make us vulnerable. A warrior who loves too deeply can be manipulated through that love. A leader who shows too much compassion will be seen as weak. But doesn't that make your lives lonely?" Lyris was quiet for a long time. "Yes, sometimes it does." Jake noticed that whenever they were together, guards and servants watched them closely. He suspected that Queen Ishara was keeping track of how much time they spent together. He didn't know if that was good or bad. One night, about 2 months after Jake had begun his training, Lyris invited him to a private dinner in her quarters. The rooms were similar to his but larger and more ornately decorated. Weapons hung on the walls, each one clearly a prized possession. They ate a meal that Lyris had personally selected, choosing dishes she thought Jake would enjoy. The conversation was easy and comfortable. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Jake found himself being more honest with her than he had been with anyone in years. "Do you miss Earth?" Lyris asked. "Every day. But I don't regret being here." "Why not?" Jake met her golden eyes. "Because I'm learning things I never would have learned otherwise. Because I'm part of something important. And because I've met people worth knowing." People? Or a person? The question hung in the air between them. Jake knew he should be careful. This was a princess, the heir to a galactic empire. Getting emotionally involved would be complicated and potentially dangerous. But he also couldn't lie to her. "A person," he said quietly. Lyris reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm, and her fingers were longer than his. The Kaisha bond is supposed to be purely ceremonial, an honor exchanged and then forgotten. But I find that I cannot forget you, Jake Morrison. You are in my thoughts constantly. Is that strange? If it is, then we're both strange, because I feel the same way. My mother would not approve. Valorians do not marry outside our species. It is considered inappropriate. Then maybe we keep this between us for now. A secret, a private matter. There's a difference. Lyris smiled, and in that moment she wasn't a princess or an alien warrior. She was just a woman who was tired of being alone. "I like the way you think, human." They talked late into the night, and when Jake finally returned to his quarters, his mind was spinning. He had come to Valoria Prime to protect Earth's interests. He had never intended to develop feelings for the princess he was supposed to guard. But life rarely went according to plan, and as Jake lay in his bed looking out at the 3 moons of this alien world, he realized that he was in. The summons from Queen Ishara came early in the morning, delivered by a royal guard who gave no explanation. Jake dressed quickly in his formal uniform and followed the guard through the palace corridors. His mind raced with possibilities. Had someone reported his growing closeness with Lyris? Had he done something to offend the queen? Or was this about something else entirely? The throne room was empty except for Queen Ishara herself. She stood at the base of her massive sapphire throne, her black crystal armor gleaming in the morning light. Her expression was unreadable as always. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, thank you for coming promptly. Your Majesty." Jake bowed respectfully. "Walk with me." They left the throne room and entered the royal gardens. The gardens were vast, filled with plants from across the Valorian Empire. Some of the flowers glowed softly, while others changed color as they moved. The paths were made of smooth white stone, and small streams of luminescent water flowed between crystalline rocks. For several minutes, the queen said nothing. She simply walked, her hands clasped behind her back. Jake followed, keeping a respectful distance. He had learned that Valorians often used silence as a tool, and interrupting was considered rude. Finally, the queen spoke. "You have been on Valoria Prime for 3 months now. Master Corvin tells me your progress in training has been remarkable. He says you fight with a creativity that Valorian warriors lack. Master Corvin is an excellent teacher, Your Majesty. Do not deflect with humility. You have impressed people who are not easily impressed. That is worth noting." She paused beside a fountain where crystal fish swam in circles. "Tell me, Jake Morrison, what do you think of my daughter?" Jake felt his heart skip, but he kept his voice steady. "Princess Lyris is intelligent, skilled, and honorable. I respect her greatly. That is a diplomatic answer. I am asking for truth, not diplomacy. What do you truly think of her?" Jake knew this was a test, but he didn't know what the right answer was. He decided to be honest. "I think she's remarkable. She's strong but also thoughtful. She questions things instead of accepting them blindly. She's kind, which is rare in someone with so much power. I consider it an honor to serve as her protector." The queen studied him with those glowing eyes. "You speak of her with warmth. Do you have feelings for my daughter, Lieutenant Commander?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I do." He expected anger, but instead the queen nodded slowly. "Good, that is what I hoped to hear." Jake blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I am not blind, Jake Morrison. I have eyes throughout this palace. I know that you and Lyra spend time together. I know you share meals and conversations. I know she smiles more now than she has in years. And I know that she looks at you the way a woman looks at a man she cares for. Your Majesty, I never intended to be inappropriate. I know the customs here are different. The Queen raised a hand to silence him. Let me be clear about something. Valorian nobility does not typically marry outside our species. We believe our bloodlines should remain pure. This tradition has existed for thousands of years. However, I am a practical ruler, and I can see when traditions no longer serve their purpose. She turned to face him fully. The Valorian Empire is powerful, but we have become stagnant. Our culture values strength and honor above all else, but we have lost something important in the process. We have forgotten how to adapt. We have forgotten compassion, and most critically, we have made enemies across the galaxy because we refuse to see value in those who are different from us. And you think humanity can change that? I think humanity represents something we need. Your species is young and energetic. You are creative and resilient. You fight not just for glory but for each other. These qualities could strengthen the Empire if we were willing to learn from them. An alliance between our peoples could benefit both sides tremendously. Jake began to understand where this was going. You want more than just a military alliance? Yes, I want a permanent bond between Valoria and Earth, and I believe the best way to achieve that is through marriage. Marriage between who? The Queen smiled slightly. It was the first time Jake had seen her smile, and it was terrifying. Between you and my daughter, of course. I am formally asking you to marry Princess Lyris and become a prince of the Valorian Empire. Jake felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Then listen before you respond. If you marry Lyris, you will gain incredible influence. You will be heir to the throne, second only to my daughter. You will help guide the future of one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. More importantly, you will create a bridge between our peoples. The symbolic value alone is immeasurable. But what about Lyris? What does she think about this? I have not yet spoken to her about it. I wanted to gauge your interest first. However, I am not blind to my daughter's feelings. She cares for you deeply, perhaps even loves you. She would accept this arrangement willingly. Jake's mind was racing. Marriage to Lyris, becoming a prince. It sounded like something from a fairy tale, not real life. But this was real, and the consequences would be enormous. May I speak freely, Your Majesty? Please do. I care about Lyris very much. But I won't marry her just to serve political purposes. If this happens, it needs to be because we both want it for the right reasons. Because we love each other and want to build a life together, not because it's convenient for our governments. The Queen nodded approvingly, spoken like a man of principle. That is exactly the kind of person I want beside my daughter. Very well, Jake Morrison. I am not commanding you to marry her. I am simply making my wishes known and giving you the opportunity to consider it. Take whatever time you need. Discuss it with Lyris if you wish, but understand that this offer will not remain open forever. Why are you doing this, Your Majesty, truly? The Queen was silent for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than Jake had ever heard it. Because I look at my daughter and see myself 30 years ago. I was forced into a political marriage with a man I did not love. It was my duty and I accepted it, but it made me cold and hard. I do not want that for Lyris. She deserves better. She deserves someone who will love her not for her power or position, but for who she is. I believe you are that person. That means a great deal, Your Majesty. There is another reason. The Crimson Syndicate is still active. The recent attack was just the beginning. Our intelligence suggests they are planning something larger, something that could threaten the entire Empire. You have proven yourself in combat. You think differently than Valorian warriors, and that makes you valuable. I need someone I can trust to protect my daughter when I cannot. Someone who will die for her if necessary. I already would. I know. That is why I chose you. They walked back toward the palace in silence. Jake's mind was overwhelmed with everything the Queen had said. Marriage, prince, heir to the throne. It was too much to process all at once. One more thing, the Queen said as they reached the palace entrance. If you do decide to accept, you will need to complete the Trials of Worth. It is an ancient ceremony that proves a candidate is worthy of joining the royal family. The trials are difficult and dangerous. Some candidates do not survive them. What do the trials involve? Combat, wisdom, and sacrifice. The specifics change based on the candidate, but I will warn you now. They will test you in ways you cannot imagine. If you fail, you will be exiled from Valoria Prime forever. If you succeed, you will be welcomed as a prince and equal. No pressure, then? The queen almost smiled. You have time to consider everything, but do not take too long. Events are moving faster than any of us would like. Jake bowed and left the queen's presence. He walked through the palace in a daze, barely seeing where he was going. Eventually, he found himself on his private balcony, staring out at the alien city below. Marriage. The word kept echoing in his mind. He thought about Lyris, about her smile and her intelligence and the way she looked at him like he was someone special. He thought about Earth and the family he had left behind. He thought about duty and love and the impossible choice he was being asked to make. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, Lyris stood there. She looked concerned. My mother summoned you this morning. Are you all right? Jake stepped aside to let her in. When the door was closed, he told her everything. The queen's proposal, the marriage offer, the trials of worth. Lyris listened without interrupting, her expression growing more surprised with every word. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. What do you want to do? I want to know what you want, Jake replied. This affects you more than anyone. Lyris walked to the balcony and looked out at the city. I have always known I would marry for political reasons. It is expected of someone in my position. I accepted that long ago, but then you arrived and you changed everything. You made me believe that I could have something different, something real, and now? She turned to face him. Now I am being offered exactly what I wanted, but I am afraid to accept it. What if you are only agreeing because my mother is pressuring you? What if you resent me later for trapping you here? Jake crossed the distance between them and took her hands in his. Lyris, I'm not going to lie and say this isn't complicated. It is, but I also know. The news of Jake's decision to attempt the trials of worth spread through the palace like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew that the human Shikarian intended to marry Princess Lyris. The reactions were mixed. Some Valorians saw it as an insult to their traditions. Others viewed it as a bold step toward a stronger alliance with Earth. Most were simply curious to see if a human could survive the trials. Ambassador Hall requested an immediate meeting with Jake. They met in her office within the diplomatic quarters. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept well. You're really going to do this? She asked without preamble. Yes, ma'am. Do you understand what this means for Earth? If you succeed, you'll be a prince of the Valorian Empire. That's unprecedented. But if you fail, the embarrassment could damage our alliance. I understand the risks. Hall sighed and sat down heavily. Jake, I've known you for 5 years. You're one of the best officers I've ever worked with. But this isn't a military operation. This is politics and culture and things that can't be solved with training and determination. With respect, ma'am, I'm not doing this for politics. I'm doing it because I love Lyris. And what about your duty to Earth? I haven't forgotten that duty. If anything, this strengthens my ability to help Earth. As a prince, I'll have real influence. I can work to ensure the alliance benefits both our peoples fairly. Hall studied him for a long moment. You've changed since you came here. You've become more than just a soldier. I'm not sure if that's good or bad yet. Neither am I, Jake admitted. But I know I have to see this through. The ambassador nodded slowly. Then you have my support. But be careful, Jake. The Valorian royal court is full of people who see you as a threat. Not everyone wants this marriage to happen. Her words proved prophetic. Over the next few weeks, Jake began to notice subtle hostility from certain Valorian nobles. They would ignore him at formal events or make comments in their language that his translator couldn't quite catch. He suspected they were insults. Master Corvin warned him directly. There are those who believe you are not worthy of the princess. They will seek to undermine you, perhaps even harm you. Watch your back, human. Why are you telling me this? Jake asked. The old warrior shrugged. Because you are my student, and because you have spirit. I would hate to see it snuffed out by political games. Lyris also faced pressure. Some of the noble houses approached her privately, suggesting that marrying a human would weaken her claim to the throne. Others were more direct, calling it a betrayal of Valorian purity. They don't understand. Lyris told Jake one evening as they walked through the garden. They see you as weak because you're human. They don't see your strength of character, your courage, your intelligence. They only see that you're different. Some people will always fear what's different, Jake said. But we can't let that stop us. You're right. Still, I worry about the trials. They are designed to be nearly impossible. My mother chooses challenges, based on what she believes will test you most severely. What kind of challenges? I don't know exactly. The trials are different for everyone, but they will test your combat ability, your wisdom, and your willingness to sacrifice. Those are the 3 pillars of Valorian honor. As the date of the trials approached, Jake intensified his training. He spent hours each day sparring with Master Corvin and the other warriors. He studied Valorian history and philosophy, trying to understand their values and beliefs. He learned their language, slowly becoming more fluent in the musical but sharp syllables. Lyris helped him whenever she could. She would quiz him on Valorian customs or explain the subtle meanings behind certain traditions. They grew closer with each passing day, and Jake found himself falling deeper in love with her. She was more than just beautiful and skilled. She was kind and thoughtful, curious about everything, and surprisingly funny. She had a dry sense of humor that caught Jake off guard and made him laugh. One afternoon, she took him to a part of the palace he had never seen before. It was a library, vast and ancient, filled with crystalline data storage devices and actual books made of materials Jake couldn't identify. This is where I spent most of my childhood, Lyris explained. While other young nobles were at parties or hunts, I was here, reading about the universe. My mother thought I was strange for preferring books to social events. I don't think that's strange at all. I was the same way as a kid. She smiled and pulled a book from a shelf. The pages glowed softly when she opened it. This is one of my favorites. It's a collection of Valorian poetry from the age of exploration, when we first left our homeworld and discovered other species. Jake looked at the elegant script, wishing he could read it better. What does it say? This poem is about a warrior who traveled to a distant world and met someone from a completely different species. At first they were enemies, but over time they learned to understand each other. They fell in love despite their differences. The poem ends with them standing together against those who tried to keep them apart. How does it end? They win. Not through violence, but through persistence and faith in each other. The poet wrote, "That love between different species is the truest test of strength, because it requires you to see beyond yourself and embrace what you don't understand." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. That sounds familiar. I've been thinking about this poem a lot lately. I think the poet understood something that most Valorians have forgotten. Strength isn't just about power. It's about connection. They spent the afternoon in the library, and Jake felt a peace he hadn't known in months. For a few hours, they were just 2 people who cared about each other, not a human and an alien, not a soldier and a princess, just Jake and Lyris. But reality couldn't be ignored forever. 2 days before the trials were scheduled to begin, Jake received disturbing news from Lieutenant Carter. She came to his quarters late at night, her expression grim. "Sir, our intelligence team picked up something. There's been unusual activity among known Crimson Syndicate cells. They're planning something, but we don't know what. Are they targeting the trials? Possibly. Or they might be using the trials as a distraction for something else. Either way, security is being increased. But I thought you should know. You need to be careful out there." After Carter left, Jake stood on his balcony looking out at the city. The 3 moons were full tonight, casting strange shadows across everything. He thought about the trials, about the syndicate, about all the ways this could go wrong. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. When he opened it, Lyris stood there. She wore a simple robe and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Without a word, she stepped inside and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know you're strong, but the trials are dangerous. People have died attempting them." "I won't die," Jake promised. "I have too much to live for. Promise me something else. Promise me that if the trials are too dangerous, if it becomes clear you can't win, you'll surrender. I would rather lose you as a husband than lose you forever." Jake held her tighter, Lyris, I've faced death before. I've been shot at, stabbed, nearly blown up. I've survived all of it because I had something to fight for. Now I have you. That makes me stronger than I've ever been. You don't understand Valorian trials. They're designed to break you mentally and physically. My mother will push you to your absolute limit. Then I'll find new limits. They spent the night together, just holding each other and talking. They spoke about their dreams for the future, about the kind of life they wanted to build together. Lyris talked about reforms she wanted to make when she became queen, ways to make the empire less rigid and more open to new ideas. Jake talked about bringing elements of human culture to Valoria, creating exchange programs and shared research projects. As dawn approached, Lyris prepared to leave. She couldn't be seen leaving his quarters at this hour without causing scandal. At the door, she turned back to him. Whatever happens in the trials, know that I love you. That will never change. I love you too, and I'll see you on the other side of this. She kissed him, then slipped out into the corridor. Jake watched her go, then turned to prepare himself mentally for what was coming. The trials of Worth would begin at noon. Jake had 12 hours to get ready. He spent them in meditation and final training exercises. Master Corvin came by to offer last-minute advice. Remember, the trials test more than strength. They test character. Show them who you really are, Jake Morrison. Show them why you deserve to stand beside the princess. I will. When the time came, Jake dressed in ceremonial armor that had been prepared for him. It was lighter than Valorian armor, but still provided good protection. He carried a plasma blade and a human pistol, representing both cultures, Sioux. He walked to the arena where the trials would take place. He passed through crowds of Valorians who had come to watch. Some cheered for him. Others shouted insults. He ignored them all, focusing on what lay ahead. The arena was massive, an open space surrounded by tall walls. Thousands of Valorians filled the stands. At the center of the arena stood Queen Ishara, wearing her black crystal armor and carrying a sword that glowed with energy. Princess Lyris sat in a special box reserved for the royal family. She looked terrified but tried to hide it. Jake caught her eye and nodded. The first trial was combat. Jake stood in the center of the arena as 3 massive gates opened in the walls. From each gate emerged a Valorian warrior, fully armored and armed with plasma blades. These were not training exercises. These were real warriors, members of the royal guard, and they would not hold back. The crowd roared as the 3 warriors advanced. Jake took a deep breath and fell into a fighting stance. He had trained for this, but training was different from reality. These warriors were bigger, stronger, and faster than him. His only advantages were experience and unpredictability. The first warrior attacked with a downward strike meant to split Jake in half. Jake rolled to the side, the plasma blade missing him by inches and scorching the ground where he had been standing. He came up and fired his pistol 3 times at the warrior's exposed joints. The shots bounced harmlessly off the armor, but they distracted the warrior long enough for Jake to close distance. Jake knew he couldn't win through strength, so he used speed and precision. He targeted weak points in the armor, places where the crystal plates overlapped. His plasma blade found a gap under the warrior's arm, and the Valorian howled in pain, dropping back. But the other 2 were on him immediately. Jake blocked a strike from the left and ducked under a horizontal slash from the right. He was fighting purely on instinct now, his body moving before his mind could process the threats. The battle was brutal and exhausting. Sweat poured down his face and his muscles screamed in protest. Then Jake saw an opening. 2 of the warriors overextended their attacks at the same moment. Jake dropped low and swept the legs of one warrior while striking the knee joint of the other. Both fell and Jake was on them instantly. His blade found critical points, disabling but not killing them. The crowd gasped. In Valorian trials, killing was expected, but Jake refused to murder warriors who were just doing their duty. The first warrior, recovered from his injury, attacked again. This time Jake was ready. He used a technique Master Corvin had taught him, redirecting the warrior's momentum and using it against him. The warrior stumbled and Jake's blade came to rest against his throat. The fight was over. Jake had won without killing anyone. The crowd was silent, unsure how to react. Then Queen Ishara spoke. The first trial is complete. Jake Morrison has shown skill and mercy, an unusual combination. He passes. Jake was given a few minutes to rest and drink water. Lyris looked relieved in her box, though her expression was still tense. The worst was yet to come. The second trial was wisdom. The arena floor opened up and a complex maze of crystal walls rose from beneath. At the center of the maze was a pedestal holding a glowing orb. Queen Ishara's voice echoed again. The second trial tests your mind. You must reach the center and retrieve the orb. But the maze changes constantly, and there are traps throughout. You have 1 hour. If you fail, you will be trapped inside until you surrender or die. Jake entered the maze, and immediately the walls began to shift. Paths appeared and disappeared. He heard mechanical sounds and saw energy barriers flickering on and off. This wasn't just about finding the center. It was about understanding the pattern. Jake moved carefully, watching how the walls changed. At first it seemed random, but gradually he noticed a rhythm. The maze was based on a mathematical sequence, something like the Fibonacci pattern but more complex. When he understood it, he could predict where paths would open next. But the traps were real dangers. He nearly walked into a floor that disappeared, revealing a pit of spikes below. He avoided a burst of flame that shot from a wall. Energy barriers forced him to find alternative routes. Time was running out. Jake knew he had to take risks. He saw a path that would collapse soon but might get him close to the center. He ran, his boots pounding on crystal floor, and leaped across a gap just as the path behind him vanished. He rolled, came up running, and saw the pedestal ahead. The orb glowed with blue light. Jake reached for it, but the moment his fingers touched it, the maze froze. A holographic image appeared, showing Queen Ishara's face. You have reached the orb, but the trial is not complete. Answer this question correctly and you pass. Answer incorrectly and the maze will collapse with you inside. Here is your question. What is the greatest strength a leader can possess? Jake thought quickly. This was a test of Valorian values. The obvious answer was physical strength or military power. But Queen Ishara had already shown him that she valued more than tradition. She had chosen him precisely because he represented something different. The greatest strength a leader can possess is the wisdom to know when strength is needed and when mercy is better. A true leader protects the weak, listens to counsel, and adapts to change. Power without wisdom is tyranny. Wisdom without power is meaningless. But both together create a leader worth following. The holographic image smiled. Correct. You understand more than many who were born to lead. The second trial is complete. The maze lowered back into the ground and Jake walked back to the center of the arena. He was exhausted, but there was still one trial remaining, the trial of sacrifice. Queen Ishara descended from her position and stood before Jake. Her expression was unreadable. The final trial is the most difficult. It tests whether you are willing to give up what you value most for the good of others. This trial cannot be explained. It must be experienced. Are you ready? Yes, Your Majesty. The Queen raised her hand and suddenly Jake felt strange. His vision blurred and the world around him shifted. When his sight cleared, he was no longer in the arena. He stood in a room he recognized immediately. It was his childhood home on Earth, the house where he grew up in Virginia. His mother stood in the kitchen looking exactly as she had 15 years ago, before she passed away from illness. His father sat in the living room reading a newspaper. His younger sister played with toys on the floor. Mom? Jake whispered. She turned and smiled. Jake, honey, come help me with dinner. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But it felt real. Jake could smell the cooking food, hear his father's breathing, feel the warmth of home. Tears came to his eyes. Then the scene changed. He was back on the horizon's edge, but now it was under attack. Explosions rocked the ship. Ambassador Hall was there, wounded and bleeding. Jake, help me. The ship is going down. You need to save the crew. Another shift. He was with his Marine unit, pinned down by enemy fire. His friends were dying around him. Commander, we need you. Lead us out of here. Finally, the scene changed one more time. He stood in a small room with Lyris, but she looked different, sadder. Jake, my people will never accept you. If you stay, it will cause a civil war. The only way to save the Empire is for you to leave. You must choose. Stay with me and watch the Empire burn, or leave and let peace continue. Jake understood now. This was the trial of sacrifice. He was being asked to choose between everything he had been and everything he wanted to become, his past or his future, Earth or Valoria, his duty or his love. But then he remembered what he had told Lyris in the library. Strength isn't just about power. It's about connection. And real strength means fighting for what you believe in, even when it's hard. No, Jake said firmly. These are false choices. I don't have to abandon Earth to love Valoria. I don't have to give up who I am to become who I want to be. The point of sacrifice isn't to destroy yourself. It's to give something meaningful for something more important. I sacrificed my safety to save Lyris because her life was worth my pain. But I won't sacrifice everything I am just to prove a point. The illusions shattered like glass. Jake stood once again in the arena, and Queen Ashara was watching him with something like approval in her eyes. You have passed all 3 trials, Jake Morrison. You showed combat skill without unnecessary killing. You demonstrated wisdom beyond your years, and you understood that true sacrifice is not about destroying yourself, but about knowing what truly matters. You are worthy, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, others stood in stunned silence. Jake looked up at Lyris, and she was crying, her face showing pure joy. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. Explosions rocked the arena. The walls cracked and crumbled. Valorian guards rushed in, weapons drawn. Through the smoke and chaos, figures in black armor appeared. The Crimson Syndicate had launched their attack. "Protect the Queen," someone shouted. Jake ran toward where Queen Ashara stood, but she was already fighting, her sword moving with deadly precision. Lyris jumped from her box, drawing her own blade and landing beside her mother. The Syndicate had planned this perfectly. They had waited until the trials when security was focused on the arena, and thousands of civilians were gathered in one place. There were dozens of attackers, maybe more. They poured in from multiple entrances. Jake fought his way through the chaos, his training taking over. He shot one attacker, disarmed another,